Welcome to Daily Life Connection. Thanks for joining me again. And I really mean that. I don't just want to say it. I am so thankful for all of you who follow along and participate and make comments and leave me notes. I just really appreciate you joining me in this journey of exploring who God is. We're going to look at Psalm 23 today. The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. He makes me lie down in green pastures. He leads me beside the quiet waters or the still waters. He leads me. I want to talk today about the God who leads us. There's a huge difference between someone who leads others and someone who drives others. Interesting, we hear in the Old West about cattle drives. And the cowboys would be on their horses and they'd get behind the cows and drive them forward. And you would see the cows panicking and running and jumping and try to get away. And they'd go out and surround them and herd them back, always driving them. It was known as the Great Cattle Drives. Very, very different for a shepherd. A shepherd would lead his sheep. He would go out in front of his sheep and he would call out to them and they would all follow him. It was a very different situation, being led than being driven. Unfortunately, sometimes even in the church, it has felt more like we are being driven towards holiness, driven towards righteousness, driven towards prayer and living holy lives than it was being led. That's not to criticize our pastors. I'm just saying God is a leader. He leads us. He leads us. He doesn't drive us. And in fact, it's interesting because in Psalm 23, when it says he makes us lie down in green pastures, actually a better translation of that is he lets us lie down in green pastures. Again, he's not driving us into them. He's allowing us to be there and waiting until we've rested and fed, and then he leads us to the quiet waters as well. What a wonderful picture of our God, the God who leads us, not a God who drives us. So, it's the enemy who drives people into distraction and drives people into despair and discouragement and desperation. It's him who drives people. It's never God. If we're feeling driven in our spiritual life, I really believe there's no question that is not from God. It's not from God. If we feel pressured to pray more, give more, serve more, live more, whatever it may be, read the Bible, when we're feeling pressured to do that, that's not God. God leads us into those things. He calls us into prayer. He calls us into his word. He invites us in. He welcomes us and accepts us, as we've talked about the last 2 days. It's this God who leads us. And the old saying goes, you can lead a horse to water, but you can't make him drink. That's the way it is with us sometimes. God leads us to his word or to prayer or to his presence or to worship. But sometimes we don't take a good deep drink, do we? But he won't drive us. He won't push our head in the water and try to make us drink. He'll lead us there. He is a wonderfully, incredibly gentle, respectful God. There's so much respect in that, isn't there? There is a respect. I think this is true. We drive cattle because they're just plain stupid. Cows don't seem to be the brightest animals on earth, do they? And so, they don't even have enough sense to follow the leader. They have to be driven. But sheep seem to have enough sense to follow a leader. And it makes a lot of difference in how the whole scenario unfolds, doesn't it? He's able to take them places and expose them to things that are for their good, rather than just having to drive them somewhere to keep them from... Oh, see, that's good, isn't it? In a cattle drive, they're driving the cattle somewhere to protect them from the wild animals or whatever, to put them in pens. But in sheep, the shepherd's leading the sheep to green pastures and quiet waters. He's leading them to good things. That's our God. He's a God who leads us. Let's thank him for that today. We'll talk again tomorrow.